Alright, so today we're going to go through the IBDP English A language and literature higher level paper 1. So for higher level, you typically get two texts. It's usually an infographic or like a journal or a news article. And the questions usually ask something like, how does the author effectively convey the message? Or something like, how does the author use format, layout, and persuasive language? And once you do enough of these, you'll get the hang of it. So today I'll be going through the higher level both texts. And by the way, standard level only has one and higher level has two. So let's see the first one. The first one is a blog post taken from this website and is a self-proclaimed busy bee. Okay, so for this one, paper 1, you usually want to plan for a few minutes before you start writing, but you don't want to spend too long, so at least just circle the main points you want to talk about in your essay, like I did right here. So this is the the blog post, and I just highlighted and circled some points that I wanted to talk about. And the question is, how do authorial choices help to create a persuasive message? Alright, so I'm going to use a Word document. Alright, so typically for paper 1, I follow a pretty simple structure. So starting with the introduction. And in the introduction, you generally want to keep it simple. So what I do first is just introduce what it is, and then followed by one more sentence just describing describing the text, describing it a little bit more, so just detail. And then you want to write your thesis statement, so what you are going to talk about, which in this case will be, how do authorial choices help to create a persuasive message? So then you're going to get into the body paragraphs. So body 1. So for this specific text, what I chose to talk about is metaphors and analogy for the first body paragraph. So metaphors and analogy. And then you typically want to give 2 to 3 examples, and no more, no less. So usually 3 is enough. So just example 1, example 2, example 3. And then you go write your second body paragraph, which in this case will be about structural organization in headings. So just how the text is structured. You can choose something else to write about, like how the author uses colors, but for this specific blog post, I'm going to choose structural organization. And then same thing, 2 to 3 examples. Sometimes 2 is fine. And then body paragraph 3 is going to be about hypothetical scenarios and rhetorical questions. And then same thing, 3 examples. And then you just want to jump to the conclusion. And then, so just overall. And if you could try, this is more directed to paper 2, but you could try and connect it to a global issue. if you can. You don't have to. So this will be the rough template that I will follow. So let's start with the introduction. So what it is. So we can see that it says this is a blog post taken from this website, and you can basically just copy and paste that. It's allowed, so we can just say this text is a blog post titled If You Want Dreams, You Have to Say No to All Yep, so just like this. You could italicize it, or if you're writing it, it's like you would do on the test, just underline the title. And written by Oliver Emberton from his website, oliveremberton.com. And then you could add who is a busy bee. So this is just the starting sentence, just describing the ad. Self-proclaimed. So basically what I'm doing is just copying the exact sentence right here. And then you could get into detail a little bit. So maybe he offers a pragmatic argument about focus and ambition. And then you would write your thesis statement, which just would be something like what you're going to talk about in your body paragraph. So through the use of metaphors and analogies, structural organization and headings, and lastly, hypothetical scenarios. Emberton effectively helps to create a persuasive message. There. And that's really all you need. Nothing more. Right. So let's get into the first body paragraph, which will be talking about metaphors and analogy. So you can just say, like, firstly, Emberton uses, or you can say relies heavily on metaphors and analogies to help create a persuasive message and make abstract ideas about productivity more memorable for the audience. So example one would be, if you can see here, this first sentence. Our brains behave like a beach ball filled with bees. And by the way, you do get 5 minutes of reading time before you officially start writing, it started this year, and this is the 2024 paper. So just make sure to read and just gather your ideas. So how does this first sentence show metaphors? Well, it helps encapsulate the core message or the central theme. And we can see that if you read through it, we can see that the bees represent numerous competing desires, while the beach ball is like a metaphor for the mind. And you will want to talk about the effect of this sentence. So you can say like this sentence shows that or conveys the message that, or something like that. So you can say like this surreal image captures the reader's attention and simplifies the concept of internal conflict or something like that. So let's write it down. So just start with one example. Example is the first sentence, which says, our brains behave like a beach ball filled with bees. Alright. So we can use the PO paragraph, so point, example, explain, and then link, which in this case will be just PE, so just point, example, and then explain. So I'm going to explain this example right here. So you can say, which is the central theme of this blog post. And then you would explain this, right? So the bees represent numerous competing desires, while the beach ball is a metaphor for the mind. This helps create a vivid image. So anytime there's a metaphor, it does help create vivid images in the reader's mind and captures the reader's attention. So you can always write that. Image helps to capture the audience's attention and helps simplify the concept of complex internal conflict. Simplify the concept. Right, so that's all you need. So just make sure to give an example, just quote the part we're going to talk about, and then just explain it like I did. So just make sure to say what your example is and what effect it has, and always related to the question, which I should do, helping to create a persuasive message. Alright, so the second example I'm going to be using is line up your bumblebees, which should be right here. So in this specific subheading, which I'm going to be talking about later on too, but just for this paragraph, we're talking about metaphors, right? So what effect does this have? Line up your bumblebees. Well, it does reinforce the earlier metaphor. So instead of eliminating desires, he suggests aligning them towards a unified direction, right? So by lining up your bumblebees, well, the bumblebees is just a metaphor, right? And then it helps symbolize the process of self-discipline. So it says, success and fitness can be complementary goals. They're like two bumblebees pushing in the same direction and stronger for it. So we can say something like, another. Okay, so transition words, so just say also Emberton towards the end of the blog post. Emberton advises the readers to line up your bumblebees. Which helps reinforce, how do we spell it? Reinforce the earlier metaphor in a more constructive way. Instead, you want to just explain this example instead of eliminating desires. He suggests that we as young people, you want to just mention the audience as young people who with ambitions, bright ambitions, align them towards a unified direction. So you could also say what the author could have said instead of what he actually said. So just say, for example, Oliver could have just said, we should align our goals, but by saying line up our bumblebees. It captures the attention of the readers. Alright. Symbolizing the process of self-discipline. Alright. Example 3. So I'm going to use this example right here. So it says your achievement equals your potential over your directions. Now you could also touch on the colors. So blue usually symbolizes peace, and then green as well, so freshness, peace. But for this specific point, I'm just going to focus on this graph right here and this equation. So furthermore, the author uses an analogy in the visual graph comparing achievement is equal to your potential over your directions. Alright, so what does this show? Well, this equation helps present the abstract idea, right? In a more simple mathematical formula. And then also, what does it do? Well, it helps appeal to the reader, right? While still reinforcing the central metaphor of direction and movement. So yeah, you could say something like, this equation helps present abstract ideas in a simple mathematical formula, which equation very logical while helping to reinforce the central metaphor and theme of the movement. Alright, helping to persuade the audience. Yep. So this will be your second paragraph, as first body paragraph, metaphors and analogy. So let's move on to the second body paragraph, which will be structural organization. So same thing. So additionally, you just want to describe what you're going to be talking about. Additionally, Emberton, okay, let's use Oliver, uses structural organization and headings to carefully design blog posts and guide readers through a logical progression of ideas. Okay, so the first example could be this heading right here, right? If you want to follow your dreams, you have to say no to all the alternatives. So what does this show? Well, this is kind of your thesis statement, right? Well, not exactly, but you know what I'm saying, of this blog post. And it sets the tone for the entire article, which all headings do. It's very direct, and it helps immediately engage with the reader, right? So we can just say, one example is the heading on the top of the blog post that says, if you want to follow your dreams, you have to say no to all the alternatives. So this shows, well, this works as a thesis statement and helps set the tone for the art, for the text or the entire article, helping to immediately engage the reader. Yep, so next one. It's actually really pretty simple if you just follow this structure. So just 3 examples, point, so just point, example, explain, example, explain. So we can also mention the subheadings right here, the curse of the great idea. And like this subheading right here. And this one, how people achieve the impossible, right? So what does this do? Well, it helps break down the article into sections, right? So addressing different parts of the argument. So it's very brief, clear, and visually separated. And then, which increases the effectiveness and helps capture the audience's attention, right? So we can say something like, also subheadings like the curse of the great idea and how people achieve the impossible. Breaks down the post into different sections addressing a different part of the argument. So something like that. This helps the blog readers consume content in a effective and efficient manner. Which also helps capture their attention. Longer, right? So example 3. So I could either talk about this list right here. Yeah, let's do this. So how to tame the swarm. So Emberton has 5 logical points, right? Practical advice. Well, what does it do? Well, it gives readers step-by-step list or step-by-step advice of what to do. So which transforms the abstract ideas into actionable strategies, which makes the argument clear, which helps the central argument become more clear, right? So you can just say, furthermore, let's actually do use additionally. In the final section, how to tame the storm. Oliver offers practical advice through a numbered list. Such as 1, aim higher, and 2, limit 3. This helps give readers a step-by-step way of transforming complex ideas into actionable steps, reinforcing the central argument clearly. Alright, so that's the second body paragraph. And then the third one is hypothetical scenarios and rhetorical questions, which I feel like it's a little weaker, but let's try. So one example is, again, by the way, you can talk about examples more than once, so just if it's strong. So I'm going to use the curse of the great idea. He says, imagine if 20 years ago you were a genius who had the idea of starting up Google and Amazon and Facebook. He argues that trying to do all three would result in failure, right? Well, this is actually pretty ironic, because if someone had the ideas for Google, Amazon, and Facebook all at once, you expect them to be insanely successful. But the article argues that you'd go nowhere, not successful at all, right? You'd be stuck trying to do too much, achieving nothing. So you could write something like, alright, so let's write, lastly, the author uses scenarios and rhetorical questions to effectively persuade the readers. And then one example is in the course of the great idea. Where he presents a scenario at the same time. He argues that this would lead to nowhere, to absolutely nowhere. Which is ironic because you would expect someone to be insanely successful and become super rich. You'd be stuck trying to do too much, achieving nothing. Emberton says that. Right? Showing the dangers of spreading oneself too thin. Alright. I think this is good. And then example 2. I think how people achieve the impossible. So this sentence right here. If you absolutely had to do it, do that. If your life and the lives of everybody you care about depended upon it, how would you? How could you? You'd simply drop everything else. So it's a rhetorical question, right? So this, well, it invites the reader into a moment of imagination, right? And it makes it more emotional to the reader. And it implies that we are capable of great achievements if only we eliminate distractions. So it makes the readers feel as if they can achieve anything they want, which is good, right? Which helps capture their attention and persuade them. So we can just say, another example is the rhetorical question. In the how people achieve the impossible section. Emberton asks if you absolutely had to do it, how would you? How could you? So these rhetorical questions, invites the reader into a moment of imagination, and implies that we are able to achieve great things, great goals, if only we eliminate distractions. Right. Making the audience feel good, and feel good. Right. Next example. You simply drop everything else. So let's talk about this right here. Well, it's very straightforward, right? And then from the emotional transition above, it transforms into a more logical solution, right? And then the you, which is more direct, helps maintain a personal tone. So whenever there's a you, it helps to build a more personal tone because it's speaking directly to you. So always remember that. So furthermore, the phrase you'd simply drop everything else creates a straightforward tone and more direct tone, which is contrasted by the more emotionally appealing tone above. The word you helps create a personal tone as well, connecting more directly with the reader. Alright, so let's do the conclusion now. So just restate the thesis. That's the main goal of the conclusion. So I can just say, overall, Emberton uses metaphors, structure, and hypothetical scenarios to effectively persuade the audience, right? Help create a persuasive message for the audience. So we can connect it to a global issue by saying this blog post persuades readers to reconsider their multitasking tendencies and instead pursue singular, focused goals. There we go. That's it. It doesn't have to be a global issue, but just connecting it to a real life example, right? So let's see. So first we wrote the introduction, just describing what the text is, and then we described it a little bit more, and then wrote the thesis statement. So just keep it simple, don't write a lot. And then for the body paragraphs, you usually want 2 to 3 body paragraphs. Maybe if you're gonna write 2 body paragraphs, just write more examples. If you're gonna write three body paragraphs, you can just keep the examples at maybe 2 to 3. So maybe 2 really strong examples or three good examples, right? So we talked about metaphors and analogy, gave 3 examples. Body paragraph 2, structural organization and headings. Again, 3 examples. Make sure to just mention what you're going to talk about. Well, of course, don't write this one right here. Just start by saying this additionally, right? Use a lot of transition words. And then additionally, furthermore, also, lastly, overall. And then, of course, the last body, which talks about hypothetical scenarios and rhetorical questions. And then move on to the conclusion, which is just restating your thesis and just connecting it to a real life example, right? All right, so let's move on to the second text, which is a comic. So here it is. The following text comic is taken from this website, and then blah blah blah, and then it asks how does the narrative style used in the comic contribute to the presentation of this scientific information. Sorry, this is actually sideways, right? So again, you would want to start by planning. You can write on the test papers, but I usually don't really waste my time doing that. I just circle the main points I'm going to talk about, which I did right here. So this is question 1, and this is 2. Alright, so we're going to follow the same structure above that we did above. So alright, so what is it? Well, you can see this text is a comic by Ed Grace taken from. Basically, I'm literally just copying what's here. You know what? Let's just copy this whole thing. Taken from edgrace.co.uk. Yeah. Ed Grace's work celebrates the 10-year anniversary of Columbus, the European Science Lab housed at the International Space Station. And then just a little bit more detail. So we can actually just write in the same sentence, which transforms technical, scientific information into something engaging and understandable. Right. We can just write the thesis statement now. So the author uses, I'm going to be talking about personification, visual humor, because it's a comic, and simple conversational dialogue. to effectively explain complex concepts, biological concepts. Which contributes, so always related to the question, contributes to the presentation of this scientific information. Right. So let's start with personification, right? So firstly, Grace uses personification of scientific equipment to help engage the reader. So, where can we find personification? Well, right here, this guy, Biolab, actually expresses concern by saying, I'm worried about astronaut Kanai. And by the way, you could talk about colors as well. So green is Biolab, and he usually represents the good guy. Well, and then green, which is aligned with green, because green usually represents peace, fresh nature, abundance, things like that. Oh, this dude is more of the bad guy, so it's in red, right? So rage, anger, things like that, right? Fire. You could talk about that if you want to. I'll see if I can include that too. So we can start by saying how Biolab is saying, I'm worried about astronaut Kanai, which brings the scientific module to life, right? Because it's just a scientific module, this dude, adding emotion and personality. And then this dude, the EPM machine, jumps in by saying what, right? And which is being sarcastic, mimicking a dramatic, frustrated colleague. And if you see this, she's actually wearing a purple lipstick, giving it character and gesture, right? Making it easier for the reader to follow these signs. So it's actually making the reader more connected in a way through personification, and more casual, like they're friends, right? So let's write it. One example is at the start. I'm going to just do 2 examples and 2 paragraphs for body paragraphs, just for the sake of time, for this text right here. At the top, where Biolab, who is a good guy, because he is in green, representing peace, nature, and freshness, is expressing his concern for this dude, Ashraf Kanai, by saying I'm worried about astronaut tonight, right? Which helps give the lab human-like feelings. The EPM machine module is also being sarcastic by saying, what? Which mimics a dramatic, frustrated colleague. Her text box is in red, which is more of the bad guy. Representing rage and anger. Her purple lipstick also adds character, making it easier for the readers to follow, who are likely young students, to follow the science as if it's a casual explanation from a friend, removing the emotional distance and contributing, always connected to the question, to the presentation of this scientific information. Alright, I'm just gonna do one more body paragraph, and then to really show you how I usually write the paper one. So I'm gonna talk about visual humor. So additionally, the author he says visual humor to reinforce scientific content. In a memorable way. For example, in the final panel, Biolab, well, if you see here, Biolab is fast asleep, right? With like zzz and closed eyes. And then right after EPM is emphasizing how important sleep is for astronauts, which is ironic because which is kind of our situational ironic, right? Which makes it more engaging while reinforcing the idea of disrupted circadian rhythm, while reinforces the idea of disrupted circadian rhythms, right? So let's write it. Is seen fast asleep, which is ironic because which is situational irony, because it makes the content more engaging. While reinforcing the idea of disrupted circadian rhythms. I don't know if this is the best example. I mean, you could write about irony. Okay, let's add one more example. This diagram right here. I think this diagram right here helps readers visually see the complex biological concept, and like this diagram right here, so the multiple sunrises, which helps the readers understand the science but remember it because it's tied to something funny or exaggerated. So let's write it. Also, the diagrams in the center of the comic showing the sunsets, the multiple sunsets and sunrises and sunsets. In one day, it helps illustrate the scientific problem, right? In a more simplified, children-friendly format, helping readers to not only understand the science, but remember it. Okay, so let's jump to the conclusion. Normally you would like to have one more body paragraph, but for the sake of time, I know this is getting boring, I'm just gonna write the conclusion. So in the conclusion, by using personification and visual humor, the author effectively conveys scientific content. Yep. So maybe just one more sentence. So rather than overwhelming the audience with data, Grace invites them to learn through storytelling. Which is exactly what makes this text so effective. Alright, so this is usually what you want to do. So for the English IBDP English A paper 1, so just start by planning and then following the structure that I mentioned earlier. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe. And in the next video, I'll go through a paper 2. Thank you.